Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
My name's Anne. I'm the co-founder of Hotbed. I'm originally from America. I moved to the UK when I was 20. I met Perdie when I was, I think 21. We were working at Tech Hub together. And then when Tech Hub shut down, we started our first company, Spy Startups, together, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And then in mid-2022, we started Hotbed, and that's what we've been building since. Outside of that, I am a very, I'd say, curious individual. I love to learn. I love sports. I love working out. I love a lot of things. So yes, that's who I am.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Perdie, over to you.
So my name is Perdie. I'm the other half of Hotbed, originally from Staines, not the States, but
I just thought you said the States.
Not the States.
We're taking that for this interview.
Massive West Side. And moved to
Staines,
London.
the pride of the UK.
Yeah. Thanks, Ali G, for putting it on the map. And then, moved to London I originally was a estate agent, hated it, and then managed to break free from estate agency. And the only job that I got offered was in what became a tech scale-up unicorn company, purely by chance. I didn't even know any of the terminology or anything about startups or ecosystem or fundraising. I just worked at this company, and then that kind of set me off on a new trajectory, which was what we ended up doing next. So fortunately, when I was at that company, the company got acquired, so got a bit of a payout, ended up using the money to go to Ghana in West Africa to train small businesses there on how to think more innovatively, and then absolutely fell in love with that, and then came back and wanted to find a job in London that would ideally pay me to do what I'd paid to do in Ghana, and then found a charity that were doing what was called an Accelerator program. Again, I didn't know any of the terminology at the time. And then, started working there before moving to Tech Hub, which is where me and Em met. And the rest of that will become, I guess, more clear as we go throughout this podcast. And then in my spare time, I live in the countryside. I really like walking and hiking and doing that kind of stuff. I also DJ a little bit, house parties, house music, that kind of thing.
Right.
Hanging out with my cats.
Very cool. Do you know what? You are the first to go that granular on some of the hobbies, which is quite cool.
After it ended, I was like, I'm going to have.
I know, yeah.
Hobbies now.
You had to do it, but I appreciate that because it's given me ideas of things to ask later. Like that otherwise, usually I have to drag it out of people. So I appreciate it. So thank you so much for the introductions, and I really am very, very happy to have you both here. It's been a while I've wanted to get you on, and it's awesome. You are also both two individuals that a lot of people have told me since I started this that you have to get them on. So thank you so much for both taking the time. It's really awesome to meet you. So listen, I'm really curious about the story of how Hotbed came together. You said you both met at Tech Hub, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk me through that. Like, well, first of all, what was Tech Hub like? What both brought you there, and then, how you met, and then sort of how did it come about from there?
Yeah. Shall I start with how I found it? So when I was working at this charity, it was quite niche what it was doing, and I decided I wanted to get more involved in startups and supporting startups. And there was quite a few accelerators at the time around London, and then Tech Hub, there was a job that came up which was called program manager or something, and the job was advertised as the most dream job you could possibly want. It was, you're spending time talking to 400 startups who are all trying to grow something, and then connecting them with investors or basically anybody else in London that those startups might want to speak to. So that could be lawyers or accountants or branding agencies or that kind of stuff. And that's your entire job, is connecting these understanding what the founders want, and then connecting them with the right people that can help them. and then hosting a few kind of events. It was in the Google for Startups building, which added another layer of credibility because everybody knows Google. And when I went for the interview there, I interviewed for a few different companies at the same time, and it just like felt right. The team dynamic, how they operated, just seemed genuine. They were the first ever co-working space in London to support tech startups. So they were really the place to go if you wanted to start and scale a tech business. So it felt like, for me, that it felt like the epicenter of the startup tech community. And to work there, especially in that role where you're connecting the startups with the wider ecosystem, like just felt like it was the most amazing job in the world. I couldn't believe it was like a real paid job that somebody was offering.
Yeah, you're going to catch the bug if you're put on the front lines like that, right?
Yeah.
Because of all of the crazy enthusiasm that you're exposed to every single day in that situation. Because the founders are like that, right?
Exactly.
And
yeah,
it's just going to rub off on you.
Yeah. How about you, Em?
It's yeah, I had a weird path to take up. So as I mentioned, I'm originally from the US, and I started at university in San Diego, and I was studying computer science, and then did a semester abroad in Rome, really fell in love with Europe, and then ended up, after I went back to the US to finish out university there, I just had it on my mind I wanted to move to London. And so I told my parents I was taking a 5-day trip here, and then I just canceled my return ticket. And then I had been in the UK ever since, but I immediately went into to finish out university here. And then I switched at that time to a business degree. And so I had this background of like computer science and switching to business. And so I kind of naturally was interested in the startup scene here. And it was funny, I was getting to the end of the year for my first year in uni here. And to be honest, I had been kind of irresponsible, and I should have started my like summer job search much earlier, but I didn't. And so then I was kind of in a panic. And so I started just posting everywhere and emailing everyone I could possibly think of, especially, I'd just moved here. I didn't know anyone. And then I posted on the Google for Startups Slack channel, and I just said a little bit about myself, what I was looking for. Perdie responded at the time for, I can't even remember what the original position was, but I think it was like an unpaid summer internship or something like that. It evolved into something else. But that's how we originally met at Tech Hub. So she hired me there, and then we worked together, and like I credit Perdie so much for everything. Like she was the person who gave me like, my first chance in London. And then, who knew what it would have evolved into today. But it was funny at Tech Hub because I was still in uni at that time, but I wasn't, while I was working there part-time, I didn't want to come across as like the uni student. And so sometimes, during classes, I would be like responding to emails. I had one time where I remembered I like stepped out in the hallway one time to like take a work call and pretended that I was not, in class at the same time. So it was a funny balancing act for those few years.
Do you remember when, so we ended up kind of helping with all these investor coffee mornings that we did? And then I remember her coming into work and saying, at your uni, they brought in an investor for you to meet. And it was Grant Thornton. You're like, I've met like all the VCs in London already. Like now I have to sit here in this session at uni and be like, wow.
And that's the exact reason why I skipped so many classes in uni, because I was like, I'm getting a better education on my job. It's fine. And I get paid.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Fun times.
Well, it's a different education, isn't it? I suppose.
Exactly.
Because I always try and explain this to people. I mean, I know there's a bit of a populist movement at the moment to say like, anti-university, anti-degree and stuff like that. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that because of, I mean, it's not really necessarily the substance of what you're learning. It's learning how to learn. That's actually the important bit. Like learning how to absorb information, how to then put that information back out, like essay writing or dissertation writing, like stuff like that. It's super, super useful skill set, and I don't think enough people really know how to learn. So, anyway, but that's a subject for another time maybe. But it's super interesting, both of your journeys. And I'll be honest, I do say that about everyone, but that's because of everyone I have on the show. But that doesn't diminish it, because if I genuinely mean it for everyone I speak to, because everyone seems to have an incredibly interesting journey into this space, and it's always full of twists and turns. And Em, you mentioned that so you switched to studying business. What made you do that? What happened? Did something happen? I assume that sort of made you go, do you know what? Actually, I want to do that now.
What happened was I hated computer science.
Okay.
And, shall we say,
I know,
not
just a roll of the dice.
Not my natural calling in life.
Okay, right.
But also I remember just realizing it's such an incredible skill set to have. It's also very specific. And while it does give you the freedom to bring your dreams to life through, coding, you can build your own product. I think having a business in background, or a background in business, I can't talk, just gave me a bit more freedom to do.
Fair enough. I mean, do you in any way regret that switch now, considering kind of, the rise of AI and quite how much computer scientists are getting paid these days? In retrospect,
if I were to regret something in my life, that would not be at the top of my list.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, plus computer scientists are going to not be required anymore because of AI. So it's
but I mean, look, you can say that about literally any job right now, right? Eventually, but I'm happy with that utopian vision.
Being an entrepreneur, because you have to keep having innovative, new, creative ideas.
Yeah,
I think we'll be all right.
I think we'll all be okay, yeah, for a while, but maybe not in our lifetimes. We'll see. Yeah. So, and what about so I'm curious to know as well, because if you both started in you fell into it, right? Let's be honest. And a lot of people I speak to, it's the same. I think it's for most of us, it's a similar case. Very few people sort of wake up, first thing in the morning at 5 years old and go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and a founder, or involved in the startup space. So what was your relationship like? Perdie, I'd be interested to hear from you first. With entrepreneurship, as a whole, were you exposed to that sort of at any point in your, sort of your earlier years in your childhood, in early school? Did you have much of an idea, a painting in your mind as to what was kind of involved in this space going in, or were you completely oblivious to it?
I would say that. So I think actually I probably did wake up at 5 years old, and I've told this story a bunch of times before, but when I was about 5 or 6, my granddad used to buy us sweeties from Woolworths, and I created a tuck shop and used to sell the sweets back to my dad.
Interesting.
And then with my sister, she always wanted to eat them, and I said, no, this is our stock. And then the pennies that my dad had paid, I was like, we need to reinvest this back into more stock to kind of grow the sweetie enterprise with our one customer, which was my dad.
Smart kid.
So
yeah.
I have always had that kind of desire in me. And then when I went to, we didn't have business at school, like GCSE school, but then at A levels, you could then study business and economics. So I did business and economics at A level, and then I did business and management with psychology at university, and then I did a master's in entrepreneurship. So it was a definite path to become an entrepreneur that I was seeking.
Right.
And at university, we had to do different challenges. So when I was doing my master's, you had to set up your own business as part of your dissertation and your thesis.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
This was writing about what you learned in the process of setting up a business with a group of people that you were studying with. Right. So in that sense, I was exposed to the business side, kind of like marketing, but in a very theoretical sense, I guess.
But not the actual startup world as it was in London at the time. Yeah.
No, yeah. So it was very like...
Did it meet your expectations once you were there? Once you were getting stuck in?
Say that again.
Did it sort of meet your expectations once you were sort of involved in that space?
When I actually was involved, so yeah, I kind of was involved. I wasn't involved, but I kind of got this entrepreneurial side of things. And then I was bouncing around. I decided I wanted to start a property business and worked for an estate agency. That's how I got into the estate agency world. But
Oh, right. So that was your own business. Sorry, I didn't realize.
No, it wasn't my own business. I intended to start my own business.
Oh, you intended to? Okay.
I wanted to learn what not to do
by
working in the industry first. So that was my kind of approach, was I'll work in a few estate agencies, I'll figure out what they're doing, like how the industry works and where there might be a gap, and then I'll start my own business afterwards. But what I actually learned was that I hated the industry. I did not want to be in the industry because it's really sharky. So, but that was like a more traditional service business, retail shopfront kind of thing. Right. Getting into the world of tech startups, that was entirely different, like a whole different language that is actually quite intimidating. If you don't understand it, you don't feel like you belong. So I would say that, but I went to university 2006 to 2010. So when I graduated, that was still pretty early in terms of tech ecosystem. So I don't think they would have taught that necessarily in an educational context at that point. It might have been a bit different by the time Em went to university, because that like startup world and that kind of thing was a bit more established. You're shaking your head, so I'm guessing not.
No, was it not?
All that learning was extracurricular, not covered in business class, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Yeah, super interesting. So, and for you, Em, what was your kind of relationship like with entrepreneurship or that kind of thing before you kind of, I don't know, came to the UK? Were you exposed to that at any point in your sort of younger years? And was there a bug there or an itch that you needed to scratch that you maybe didn't really know about?
I always knew I would start my own company and had a gazillion ideas growing up. My parents loved to tease me about my first business idea, which horrific in retrospect. I was really obsessed with becoming an astronaut. I really, really wanted to become an astronaut when I was younger. And I was also obsessed with reading. And I was like, guys, why is no one thinking about the fact that when astronauts get to the moon, they're not going to have anything to read? Like, I think there needs to be a library up there. And so my dream was to set up the first library in space. And when people asked me what I wanted to be growing up, I would tell them an astronaut librarian, which I can't live down. They love talking about that.
That is awesome. I want to say off the record, that is
Kindles,
awesome.
It wasn't on my mind. But who's thinking about what astronauts are going to read,
Well, I mean, a Kindle just needs charging, and and you have to find the charger, and in space that's going to be more difficult. So exactly. I think a book is probably more practical.
You could actually set up a library instead.
You could still make that dream come true because nobody else has done it.
Right. There you go.
But
you're right. But I love the fact that you qualified that idea with why is no one thinking about the fact that the astronauts need to read, and I'm like, you're right. No one is thinking about.
We're so focused on thinking whether or not the rockets are going to explode. We've completely forgot the other problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is a problem. I can just imagine it on a slide deck. Do you know what I mean? The problem statement. Astronauts get lonely and bored.
About this. But
it's awesome. I love it.
I've let that dream go.
Okay.
But yeah, there were always business ideas that I was annoying everyone around me with growing up.
Yeah.
Would you say that your dad or mum or anyone in your family was entrepreneurial when you were growing up? Man?
That's what I was interested to ask both of you, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was, he ran a company that he joined when it was very small and then took it over and expanded it. And so definitely, I think through that, he wasn't the founder of the company, but what I saw through that was like the unglamorous part about running a company. It's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of problems. And I think I'm super thankful for him for sharing the ins and outs, because I just learned so much at the dinner table every night. And he would sometimes like present a problem to me and be like, okay, how would you solve this? And then I remember saying, okay, this is what I was thinking. And he'd be like, okay, but you didn't consider X, Y, and Z. And like that just constantly kept opening my mind to different blind spots. But also I had a very dear family friend growing up who started a company called Life Fitness, which built the original elliptical machine. And his equipment is found in gyms all around the world, and he exited, but learned so much through that. And just seeing the idea, like the thing that has always been most exciting to me is the idea of like you have an idea and then you get to bring it to life, and how you bring it to life and how you service your customers is like literally the most exciting thing in the entire world to me.
Yeah, there's something about just the gestation of it, right? That's super exciting. I think it's like being a parent almost. You know, that idea of you get to be responsible for for breathing life into something. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's a very really interesting that you had that exposure. What about you, Perdie? Did you have, because I wanted to ask both of you that, so thank you for preempting that question. Did you have much of an exposure?
I think I was like the total opposite. My dad was in the police his whole career,
Right,
and moved up the ranks within the police. And my mum was kind of like a career. Well, she also worked in the police. They met at school, but then they were both in the police force together. And then,
well, both police officers, or just all working in?
he was a police officer, and she was admin with the police.
Right.
And they were very much, which I thought was a generational thing. Like, you stick with one career for life. You buy one house, you get married, and then you buy a house, and then you stay in that house for life. And they didn't really like risk. I guess like the risk appetite from that generation, I always felt was quite low, and they try to deter me and my sister from doing anything that would be considered high risk. So my sister, who would be considered like the golden girl of the family, got a career from university and stayed in the same job for 15 years. She left when she had a baby. And then my dad used to get really annoyed at me for like chopping and changing, and, oh, you're an estate agent now, but then you don't like it, so you're just going to leave, and then you work at this new company and you're only there for 18 months, and then you just leave, and then you just go to Ghana, and then you come back, and what are you doing now? And I think he just thought I was a bit all over the place with how I was operating in my life, which it made me kind of the black sheep of the family. But I always just thought it was a generational thing, that, you know, like that generation always had like your one career that you're always going to have, whereas we're a bit luckier that you can have portfolio careers and gig economy and the side gigs and all that kind of stuff. So I think I don't think I would have been happy if I would have led that life.
Yeah, nor me. I totally sympathise with that, and I sympathise with the whole black sheep thing as well too. That was definitely me. But yeah, I guess you're right. That really was the way things had been done. But I don't think that wouldn't have. That's because of lack of choice, right? You know, that's what it was. I mean, you know, the lack of the internet and all the opportunities that opened up. Obviously, we didn't have the tech space, but I mean, even before that, you know, just being able to work from home, or, you know, to even find out about jobs that were for outside of your own town or city, like, you know, just even that was more difficult. So I guess it mostly comes just down to choice.
And I think
and the uncertainty of things, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, because their parents were involved in the war and just had so much chaos and upheaval that they then put on their children like the massive benefit of like security and comfort. And so that's what they learned from their parents, was that's the most important thing after having like complete chaos, is to have security and comfort. And you should be so lucky that you get to live this life.
And I suppose to some extent as well, the idea of enduring hard times and kind of doing it with a smile as well. And then that must transfer over into work, right? It's like, well, this is your job, and it doesn't really matter if you like it or not. It's your job, and you will do it, and you will do it well, and you'll be thankful for it. And, you know, whereas our generation is a bit more like, I don't like this job, I'm going to quit. My boss looked at me funny this morning. I'm going to quit. You know, that kind of thing. Super interesting. Generational differences. So then tell me how the idea for Hotbed came about. What happened? There must have been, again, I assume, some sort of catalyst, some moment, some conversation that took place. What was that?
We could talk about the conversation that happened that made Spice come about, which was our first company.
Oh, right. Of course, that was first. Okay, yes. Please,
and then maybe what happened after that to make Hotbed come about.
Of course,
but
the Spice Startups. Right.
Yeah, the Spice Startups one was, we had a lockdown walk, because walking was obviously the only thing that you could do during lockdown. And so Tech Hub, where we were working at the time, we were fairly sure that it was going to go into administration. because we could see the calendars of the people in charge and the meetings that they were having and researching the companies that they were meeting. We were like, this isn't good. It's fine. 4 years has passed.
You two together, enough going fast.
But yeah, we got told, we just got told one day that it was likely that the company wasn't going to exist for that much longer, or there was a possibility that the company wasn't going to exist for that much longer, because we were in COVID, and it was, their main revenue model was people renting office space. So when everybody's working from home and nobody's renting office space, it's very difficult to continue financially supporting a business that has a massive office space in London. So we had a walk, and we just talked about the implications of what that could mean for us.
What, just the both of you?
For the two of us, which essentially was, we're not going to have a job in potentially 3 days' time if this doesn't work out. And so sorry to interrupt, and we'll get back to that. So I would assume then that when you hired Em, you guys must have hit it off, right? You guys must have become fast friends pretty quick to be having this sort of walk, just you and her, in the middle of all this chaos. Would that be fair to say? So we've been working together for 2 years by this point.
So
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
We got on really well, but she was still my boss. I was in uni. I was working, I was at the bottom of the food chain, so it's not like we were intimate friends,
Right. You weren't soulmates just yet. Okay.
No. I can't actually remember now that you're saying this who initiated the walk.
Right.
Conversation.
Yeah, I think it was because everyone else was furloughed. We were the last two people.
Oh yes, yeah.
The team had been furloughed, so it was just the two of us. So that's when we started.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we were still running a virtual program. That was it. Yeah. So everybody else.
So you were the last two on the sinking ship, basically.
Yeah.
Fair
enough. I will say, I did love working there, and the people there and everything. And it was a really sad time when it shut down, not only for the team but for the whole, all of the members of Tech Hub, and then for the whole ecosystem. It was in the newspapers and stuff. That's how big of a deal it was at the time. And then outside of just being sad that whole legendary brand was coming to an end, there was also the implication that we wouldn't have a job. And
I remember when it took place. I heard about it, and I was saddened by it. Yeah, because
we're gonna be made redundant in in the middle of a kind of global pandemic, unprecedented times. Everyone's talking about recession coming. How easy is it going to be to even find another job at this point? Because everybody was still on furlough, and everyone was being quite conservative with money and who there wasn't massive hiring sprees going on.
Yeah.
So I think that was what the walk, and then MA at the same time was just about to do her last exam for university, because it was the summer. So that freed up her time. So she had 100% time, and then we were both going to have 100% of our time. So someone floated the idea of starting a business. I think it might have been Em, but I'm not sure. And we were like, at this point, if Tech Hub did go into administration, which we still didn't actually know at that point, but it's we're not going to have anything to lose, but we have everything to potentially gain.
And so talk me through the specifics of Spice Startups. What is the concept? What was it? What did you guys do? Em, do you want to take that?
So Perdie and I, we'd been doing the program at Tech Hub, and it was pretty well known, and there weren't many other places that were doing something like that and providing that type of support, especially around investment for founders. And then during COVID, of course, we moved everything virtual. And honestly, right now, a virtual program is not that groundbreaking, but at the time, no one was doing it. Everyone was focused on in-person programs. And so we had about 3-4 months there where we were testing out what it took to run a virtual program, and actually kind of got it off the ground, and it was running pretty well. And so when Tech Hub shut down, we started to get approached by people who knew what we were doing at Tech Hub and was wondering if we could do it for their business. And so we had a few projects come about. And so Spice was essentially what it ended up evolving into was us white labeling these accelerator programs for companies that were either like corporates or scale ups that sold to startups. And so they were using these growth programs as a customer retention and marketing tool in order to, connect with their target customer. And we really enjoyed doing that. And I think working with a lot of different clients in that sense gave us exposure to the commercial side of the program, because everything that we had done for Tech Hub was run, it was run just for Tech Hub with Tech Hub's mission in mind. And then when we were kind of having to put on hats of other companies running that, it was we got a lot of insights from that. But during that time, it was really the first time that people were starting to focus on finding and securing investors virtually. And it was quite interesting to see that evolve. And at the start of COVID, everyone was talking about how this shift to online would unlock a global pool of capital. And that was it was very exciting to us, but it just didn't really seem to happen. Like, the desire was there, but it didn't. People were still investing locally. So we had that problem in our mind. And then we also, through the programs that we are running virtually for our clients, found that we were able to support a very large number of startups in an online format. So most programs were focusing on supporting a small handful of founders, 8, 10, 12 founders. And we found like, hey, we can actually run programs with hundreds of founders. And I mean this humbly, but like, crush it. Like, the founders can have an exceptional experience. We can deliver what we want. And this virtual format works really well. And so we kind of combined that with this desire to find investors who weren't local to you. And that's what eventually catalyzed us starting Hotbed.
Amazing. And how does something like that?
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Make money. Like, I know it might seem like an odd question, but I think that, that's something that a lot of people in this space wonder. That there's obviously a lot of work that going into coordinate this, to reach out to various founders, to bring, you're essentially, acting as a super connector for all of these, incredible people. But then where's the revenue opportunity? You talked about the previous, Tech Hub. We know that was kind of going through the model of, co-working space, and that's predominantly where a lot of their revenue came from. So how were you managing to make money?
I think different people do it differently, but our model is that we're sponsored to run programs.
Right.
So we have partners who we work very closely with to bring them into the community and build a relationship between them and the startups. So all of them have a product that their customer is a startup.
Right.
And so part of their marketing plan, brand awareness, is having those relationships as early as possible with their potential customers. So accelerator programs where you get startups that are either just setting up their business or just closing a fundraise or just hiring their first team members or just onboarding their first customers. If you're that customer service software or hiring software or fundraising software, you want to get people at that exact point where they're ready to make that purchase decision. And so we partner with them. They'll come in and speak to our cohorts. They add value with content, but at the same time, they're building their relationship as the person to go to for X product when the time comes that you are going to need that product as a founder. So that's worked for us really well, because it means that obviously we can continue running the day-to-day operations, but we can do it in a really founder-friendly way, because we're not having to charge the founders huge amounts of money to go through this experience. And then the partner also wins because they're getting access to their customer.
Right. So it sounds like a very similar model from Spice startups moving into Hotbed to a degree then. So for those that don't know Hotbed, and I'll be honest, I think Hotbed's a pretty well established name now in at least the London startup scene, and maybe the southeast, kind of or the south, sorry, of England, and broader than that too. I mean, I know people from around the world that talk about you guys and what you're up to. So amazing, and well done, and congratulations. yeah, what is Hotbed for those that don't know? For the few of the watching and listening that don't know, first of all, what are you doing? Not knowing, and then explain, if you could, what it's all about.
I'll let you take this one.
So I think how other people define us is probably different from how we view the company. I think so. From the outside, we're a virtual accelerator for founders around the world. And so we work with pre-seed and seed stage companies. We give them loads of oftentimes free support, and help them, one, meet investors, but two, understand what it takes to find investors themselves and go into those investment conversations feeling super confident. A lot of the support is also around growth as well. So it's growing and fundraising. Those are the kind of the two topics that we cover. And we support founders via programs that we run. We have two programs, Land and Expand. Land's our program for super early stage founders, kind of anything past just day one. Expand is for founders who have already raised friends and family round and are gearing up for larger rounds. And then we also host a series of events as well, like Founders Camp. We host it biannually. It's a one-day anti-conference conference. We can talk more about that later. I could speak about that for days, especially because the next one is next week. So it's kind of at the front of our minds right now.
Right.
So from the outside,
as of this recording, but when this comes out,
yes,
it would have passed.
You
right?
will have missed it, and you'll have to come to the one in spring instead. Stay tuned. But so that's who we are from the outside. But on the inside, we've always been really focused on two specific problems, I would say. Number one is, as Perdie mentioned before, like she supported founders from all around the world. I've traveled and lived in different places, and like both of us are really focused on the challenge around like talent is evenly distributed around the world, but opportunity and funding is not. The overwhelming majority of money goes into just 5 cities around the world, which make up less than 0.005% of the population. And it's kind of astounding from both a societal level, but also just from the perspective of an investor. Like if you have a limited amount of money and you want to give it to the most talented people, what are the chances that all the most talented people live in 5 cities? I would say the chances are pretty slim. And so purely from an investor perspective, you're missing out on this global talent pool. And so, as we mentioned before, with the shift or with the demand of finding investors and investment outside of your local area, we really thought that problem was going to be addressed during COVID, and it wasn't. So that was a huge catalyst for Hotbed. And then the second thing that we focus on as well, or that we think about often, is at Tech Hub, as Perdie mentioned, like we worked very closely with many of the top investors in London. And we heard about all the challenges that investors face. And then also at Tech Hub, we worked with over 450 companies there, and then thousands through Spice. So we're intimately familiar with the problems that founders face when they're raising investment. And it just seemed like everybody was trying the same. Everyone was trying the same things to solve the same problems. And so from an investor point of view, their deal flow strategy and their decision-making strategy, it's not particularly differentiated. And so we knew we wanted to move into the investment space, but felt like when we did, we wanted to make sure we were truly doing things differently and we had a meaningful competitive edge. And so I won't go too in depth about the product that we're building, but it essentially is built to solve both those two issues. The talent is evenly distributed around the world and capital isn't. And how can we invest in a way that is meaningfully different?
That's super interesting. So and especially the product you said you're working on that, and I assume you can't talk about that if it's sort of in stealth, as it were. Okay, all right, cool. But I might pry a little bit into that in a minute. But one thing you mentioned there that was super interesting as well. You mentioned a couple of things that were, but the one thing that stood out to me particularly was you were saying about how everyone assumed that sort of in lockdown that there would be a sudden evening of things, a kind of democratization, if you will, of things, and it didn't happen. And I actually was thinking that more from the perspective of kind of like the workforce. And I'm still surprised that it didn't happen. But, I had this dream where it was a startup I was involved with as a co-founder and CCO at the time. Didn't pan out, but anyway. And, I had this sort of vision where I imagined that we would be able to get our job roles in front of people who ordinarily would never get the chance to work, in somewhere like this. Maybe they might live in the suburbs, or they might live in, out in the sticks. They might live in, I don't know, wherever, but they wouldn't ordinarily get exposed to these kinds of job roles, or ever think that they could be able to do them because of maybe, because of poverty or whatever it might be, right? They just wouldn't be able to get to that, maybe afford to even get the train into town or whatever. And then suddenly there's a democratization. And I thought, okay, this is brilliant. We're going to suddenly get, people from all different backgrounds suddenly being able to get access to really cool jobs that otherwise they couldn't. And that still didn't happen. And that's really shocking to me. Like that still didn't happen. And I just don't get, and I think that's a failing on all of us for not realizing that, yes, the opportunity is potentially there for everyone, but the problem was we were all using the same stuff in a way to kind of communicate to the world what these job roles were, or what was going on. And it didn't really, because of these people was just sat at home, and they weren't proactively looking. We needed to be more proactive, essentially, to get in their faces, was kind of the point. And we weren't. We were still just talking in our own circles. And I think that's where we missed out. We needed to make more noise and be a bit more innovative there. I still think it's doable, but yeah, so that's just what it reminded me of. But yeah, super interesting. So you still run both. So you, from what I understand, right? So Spice Startup still exists and Hotbed still exists. Is that correct?
Kind of, but we've majorly reduced what we do with Spice to focus the vast majority of our attention on Hotbed.
Fair enough. Okay, and you mentioned a couple of other things there about this, or the conference. So what are these conferences? What's involved in all of it?
It's like a full day in person experience of what one of our programs would be.
Right.
Is how I tell other people about it.
Like a taster kind of thing.
Kind of like a taster. So if you don't want to commit to joining a 6-week experience, you can come just for the day. For us, it's a really good way for us to meet new people. And kind of invite them into the Hotbed community. So we've had, so this will be our 5th Founders Camp Summit next Friday, as in Friday the 4th of October, so previous Fridays. And we've had every single time some high profile speakers. So we've got Michael Acton-Smith from Calm speaking at the next one. We had Miguel McKelvey, from co-founder of WeWork, speaking at the last one. We've had Chris Sheldrick from What 3 Words, blockchain.com, Street Bees, Koro Kids. So well recognized.
But you haven't booked me yet, so I'm just saying.
There's still time.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're not quite there yet, but
so we always have like a high profile inspirational speaker who brings in a bunch of people who really want to hear their story. Right. But then a lot of the content is just tactical, actionable advice from people who have just been in your shoes. So outside of the Miguel McKelvey, who will be, give a very inspiring talk about what happened with WeWork, we'll bring in a Series A founder or a late seed stage founder who'll talk about how they closed their seed round and how many customers they had when they closed their seed round, and how they prioritized product development, and who they hired as their first few team members after they got the money. And so it really is like that one step ahead of where you're at, person sitting in the audience watching, and how you can apply that advice in a really tactical, practical way. And then it won't just be founders, there'll be investors talking. But again, we didn't want it to be like the normal content that you would hear at a conference where they don't really get into it. So the content is designed to actually get some proper answers from investors. And we don't let people just kind of stick on surface level conversation. Like, we always dig deeper. We ask for more interesting opinions. We're the ones interviewing them a lot. So we make sure that the questions are juicy and relevant and useful, if we're interviewing founders or if we're interviewing investors. And then we have domain experts as well. So that might be like Beth Carter, who came before. She was head of growth, now director of growth at Flexa, and she'll be talking about like growth strategies in a super tactical way again. So in the programs that we run, we also bring in been there, done that founders, investors, and domain experts. So it's that same profile of speaker, but they're all delivering content back to back over one day. And then the founders in the community. One other thing that we learned during lockdown when we were doing programs is you can build community virtually, which we weren't sure that you could. We didn't think that there would be a very strong community feeling around the virtual cohorts that we ran, but there really was, which was
takes work, but you can.
which was, I mean, I guess because everybody was at a very similar stage and had very similar challenges. They bonded quite well, despite the fact that they'd never met face to face. But then
the appetite was there, right? Because everyone just knew this was really the only option. So there was a real yearning for finding connection.
Yeah, people were taking advantage of the fact that you could even meet on Zoom with your little video call, because the need for connection was just so there. But then, any in-person opportunity for founders to actually meet properly face to face for the very first time. And so we've got alumni across different cohorts, as well as new founders who all come for the day. And a lot of them are like, oh my God, it's you. I didn't realize you were that tall. Or, I've only ever seen you on Zoom, but I feel like I know you really well, but we've never actually met in real life. So we were only intending to do it once as a kind of launch event, but then we got such good feedback that we've just kept doing it.
It's interesting. I don't differentiate now between meeting someone online and meeting someone in real life. Like, I just now consider that we've met. Like, I just, it's just so, high fidelity and we're so comfortable with it now that I feel like we're sat in the same room together, literally at this point. You know what I mean? It's not that much different. Have you found then that the appetite has changed now, and that people's appetite for in-person stuff is more there now, and it's kind of dissipating a bit for the virtual stuff, or is it just different strokes for different folks kind of thing?
I think the demand's been pretty much the same. I would say the only difference is now, when we first started, pretty much no one was offering what we were doing virtually, and now we see a lot more virtual events and different and virtual programs. But people who love in person love in person. People who love virtual, and then there's a lot of people who who like both and like the flexibility. I would say the other thing, just going back to Hotbed, but this also links with our events, and I think this is something that we do quite differently, is we're pretty obsessed with our brand and the way our brand speaks with founders. When we were building Hotbed, and this is still something we think about all the time, it's like a lot of the players in this space have a very like corporate-y feel, partially because their accelerator programs run from corporates or run from banks, or that's just kind of how they started. And for us, we have, as we're saying, like, we have different backgrounds and we have different personalities than probably like the average tech founder. And we really, like, our brand's very much a reflection of that. When people come to Hotbed, one of the main things that we focus on is like, they should always feel like Hotbed is communicating to them in the way that like they speak with their best friend. And so as Perdie was saying, like, there's all this lingo that goes into this world, and we have a lot of incredible founders who come to us who have years, sometimes decades of experience, but it's the first time being a founder. And it's like, someone doesn't want to feel like they're being spoken down to, or like they're expected to come having all of this background knowledge that they just don't have. And sometimes I think it can feel like you're being spoken down, you're being talked down to in some way. So it's like, Hotbed should always feel like you're having kind of like a fun conversation with your friend. You can be casual. You don't have to like put on a businessman or businesswoman face. And so the way that manifests in our events is, our events are very fun. It should go, even if you don't know anyone, you should enter the room and you should feel like you can go up and talk to people, and that you don't have to be like, oh, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. What do you do? Like, it's more relaxed, I think that also comes to like, we have good playlists at our events. Like, we literally think about every single detail, the colors, what people are going to think about the first like 10 seconds they enter the room. All of those small little details really, really matter for the person who spends 2-3 hours out of their day to come to one of our events.
Yeah, and it should be, like, because like you said, people are spending 2-3 days out of their day.
Exactly.
People's time is valuable, especially if you're a founder, right? You guys know that more than anyone. Like, every minute matters, and there's an enormous amount of guilt that comes with doing events as a founder. Anything that you're doing that's not working on your business, even though that is still good for your business, you can sometimes feel incredibly guilty about it. I know I do, because I don't live in London. I live in Eastbourne on the south coast. So for me, going to an event in London is like, okay, I have to book the whole day out. Like, I'm driving, and then I feel incredibly guilty. Was that good? But now, I used to, less now, because now I understand the value of it. But that can definitely be a thing, right?
Yeah, someone had a notebook and they didn't write any notes throughout the whole founders camp. That would be a massive failure for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we do charge a small our first founders camps, we didn't charge anything for the first few, and now we have like a pretty normal ticket price just to like make sure we get the sign up to attendance ratio right. But like
Right.
the money aside, the thing about is like how much time investment it is for founders, especially when it's the full day. Like those are meetings that aren't being had. Those are team catch-ups. Those are investor meetings, investor outreach that isn't being had, emails going unanswered. Yeah. And so when we look out to the audience and see 100 people there, like we take the content there super seriously, and creating the questions for the founders. Like none of that is something that we overlook.
And the other thing that we love about it is there's no like them and us kind of thing. So we partly by the design of the building that we have, there is a stage, but in order to get to the stage, the speaker has to walk through the entire crowd to get to the front of the room, and then they have to go back again through the entire crowd. Yeah. And so they stop and like take selfies with the founders or chat to the founders. Like there is no like, you are the lord of startups, and then you get like shuffled out of this side door because you're too important to speak to anyone. Like everyone is treated equally.
I love that attention to detail, though. You guys are like the Stanley Kubricks of the the startup event spaces, because that is super important. You know, it's like it makes me think a lot of funny enough what we were talking about very briefly on the little break we had about my background in restaurants and working as a chef and all that. You know, there was a huge emphasis, especially when I started training as a chef, and because I went to work in France for a bit and I was training there, and there's a huge emphasis on every detail matters. Right? Like these people are taking time out of their lives to come and spend that with us, and it's down to us to make sure that everything from the moment they walk in is as perfect as it can be, whilst also communicating our vision, our yes, but that's what they've come for. But it's also about their occasion and their big day or bad day or whatever it might be. You know, I remember someone explaining to me, as people come here because they're celebrating a birthday, a marriage, or mourning the loss of a friend, and things like that. And it's like, you have no idea the impact that you have on someone's life for the few hours that they might be with us just eating a meal. And I was like, wow, like
I love that.
That's a lot. That's a lot to put on a 16-year-old kid. It's like the power, and then I went mad.
How great you learn that early.
Yeah, but it is true, isn't it? Hospitality, and a lot of what we do in this space it does come down to hospitality. I think, especially those of us that are facilitators and connectors and things like that. There's something to really be said for just taking care in our hospitality, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent. So we're going to take a quick break now, the official break now, not a technical one. And for us, but for those listening and watching, this is the end of part 1. So thank you so much for joining. In part 2, I definitely want to delve a little bit deeper into a couple of things you said about the thing that you're working on, the product side of things, and also something else you said to do with the conferences about how a lot of it is surface level quite a lot of the time, and you get a bit more granular. So that's going to be what I want to ask about next. So thanks for those that have been listening and watching so far. Come back in a couple of days' time to catch part 2.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.